Welcome to Imperfect Genius, the podcast that provides technical advice on effectively navigating the business development journey and offers advice on building successful careers in the tech industry. I'm your host, Rachel Foster, a tech professional, educator, and entrepreneur. And today I have the pleasure of chatting with Tracy Williams. Tracy is the Chief People and Culture Officer at New Relic. New Relic is a cloud-based observability platform that helps businesses monitor, debug, and improve performance of their applications and infrastructure. In her role as CPCO, Tracy oversees the company's people strategy in support of the company's business goals, culture, and core values. She's passionate about building a culture of community where all relics are engaged, supported, and motivated, and have a strong sense of belonging, allowing them to do their best work for New Relic customers, each other, and every day. Prior to joining New Relic, Tracy was a HR leader responsible for full-scale HR support and West Coast operations for
Conversant or
Conversant, thank you, Conversant. CJ Affiliate, a marketing company. She has more than 15 years of HR experience, including holding a regional HR leadership position with Target and Michael's Arts and Crafts stores. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from the University of California, Berkeley. Would you say?
I said, go Bears.
A Juris Doctorate from the University of California College of Law, San Francisco, and is a member of the board of directors of Nth Dimension, a nonprofit organization dedicated to equipping future physicians with resources, mentorship, and hands-on experience needed for success. Tracy, welcome to the podcast. Woo!
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you, Rachel, finally.
I know this has been a long time coming. Like it has literally been, you know what? It's almost been exactly 2 years because it was 2 years ago that I left New Relic. And when I was leaving, I was promising everybody, oh, I'm going to have you on the podcast. But you, like, I really meant it. Not that I didn't mean it for everybody, but I was like, oh, I need to have you on the podcast. Even though at that time, the podcast didn't exist. It was just an idea in my mind. And we've been trying to do this for a while now. So I'm just so happy to finally have this conversation with you on mic. Yay! Okay.
Exactly.
But before we get started, I want to talk about how you and I know each other. So I do this for most of the guests that I have on the podcast are people that I know. They're very impressive people like yourself. They're people that I know, but they're very impressive. But occasionally I have just somebody that I've met like through some conference or something like that, and I don't really know them very well. But when I do know someone, I like to tell the listeners just a little bit about our history, because it comes through in the conversation a lot of time. As even though I'm asking questions and digging into like your background and like your vision for in this case we're talking about leadership and leading with impact, even though we're going to be talking about that, I feel like our relationship will play into it. So I just like to tell the listeners a little bit, and for you it's most important for me to tell this because honestly, Imperfect Genius and this podcast probably would not exist without you. For the listeners who are just listening and not looking at the video, you should see her face. So let me explain. So again, we know each other because I worked at New Relic, but it wasn't just because I worked at New Relic, because again, you're like way up here, senior C-level, and I was just a little lowly nobody.
Stop it. Never.
But because you're the Chief People and Culture Officer, well, and at the time you were, I don't remember what your role was. You were promoted to that position at the time that I was there, but you were still in a role where culture was important and ERGs, employee resource groups, were important to you. And I believe, I'm not 100% sure, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that you were directly responsible for the founding of Black Relics and Black Girl Magic Relics. Is that true?
Not quite.
Okay.
So obviously I played a really instrumental role in its ongoing development, but Black Girl Magic Relics did start when I was there. And it had a lot to do with that. But like just our ERGs and really sort of focus on Black Relics started with Mikey Butler, who's the reason why I ended up at New Relic. So he started the Relics of Color ERG, and then we had an affinity group sort of branch out from that. And I was very active with Black Relics in particular. I was the sponsor for Relics of Color, but Black Relics obviously was my passion. So I also spent a lot of time just focused on engaging with Black Relics, especially after George Floyd was murdered.
Right. And that's when I started in 2020, because that was 2020. And I started in 2020, literally, I think couple of months after that happened. And so I came in at a very pivotal time, excuse me, from a culture perspective in terms of it, just what was happening in the world. I mean, we were dealing with the pandemic, and then there was George Floyd. 2020 was just a very tense time.
Man,
and
it was too
and
much.
I
It was what it was. Too
Yes,
much.
and I started in the summer of 2020, which is a crazy time to start anywhere to do anything, especially with regard to culture. And I should mention that I had been working in tech by that point in time. Let me do the math. Let's see if I started in 2020. I had been working in tech for 35 years at that point in time, you know. Yes.
But
Because I started when I was born. I came out, I'm a
exactly.
genius, right? I was a child prodigy, right? I
Yes,
mean, the
exactly. I'm
number
like,
is accurate, but I am counting back to my first internship, which is when I was 15.
yeah,
My first job ever was doing
exactly.
Fortran programming for General Motors, you know. So
That
like I'm counting that because why
yes.
wouldn't you count that? I was working in tech, and I worked in tech throughout undergrad and grad school, you know, the whole time. So anyway, my point though is, so I had been working in tech for a very long time, and as a Black woman in tech, that looks a certain way, especially if you started in the 80s like I did. And so coming into New Relic, and again, I didn't know the history, but coming into New Relic, and I think it was definitely day one. I got welcomed into the Slack group for Black Relics, and then I think it was Gwen Hurd, and I've interviewed Gwen on this podcast multiple times before. I think it was Gwen who then invited me to Black Girl Magic Relics. Now, and for me, I mean, we'll talk about colorism and skin tone and all that, but like I was like, they know I'm Black. It's like, wow, this is amazing. They actually know I'm Black. So, and so it was just like day one, it was just this welcoming environment. And then, Gwen reached out to me because we had the same job. We were solutions consultant. And she's like, I want you to come shadow me and see, attend all my client calls with me so you can learn how to do the job. And then, we had the Black Girl Magic lunch and learns. And it was just such a welcoming environment from a cultural perspective. And that was it. And then you mentioned George Floyd. We had psychologists who were coming in and doing group, group, what do you call it? Group therapy sessions with
Yeah,
us
group
about what
therapy.
was going
Yep.
on in the world. Yeah, it was, and I was like, this is the most amazing place I have ever worked in my life. I was like, this is never, again, in 35 years, I had never been so welcomed, especially as a Black woman. I had never been so welcomed in the tech space. And like I say, I felt like you had a direct, as in your role, even if you didn't found it, you were directly responsible for making sure it continued. And I know that
Yeah.
you were directly responsible for bringing, doing some of those group therapy sessions and bringing in, I think it was what, Black Girl Doctor
Black
to
girl
come in and
doctor. That's
yeah,
right.
to
Yep.
come in and
That
do
it.
that. So, and we worked together on, because there was the BIPOC and Tech event, and then I was on the steering committee for that, and then I ended up on the panel. And again, I know there was like you invited me into that. So it was one of the most amazing experiences I had in tech as a Black woman. And so when I was leaving, and I was leaving because I just wanted to go do my own thing. I wanted to, start my business, or my business had existed for years before, but in a different capacity where I was just doing corporate consulting, like contracts and whatnot. But I wanted to do something different because I was like, you know what? This is a great environment. This whole community is great, but it shouldn't just exist at this one company. Like it should exist for everybody. I was like, there should be a way to, have this kind of community for Black people in tech independent of where you work. And I know that, there's pockets of it at different companies where it's, some places it's better than others. But I just felt like I wanted, and especially for Black women, I wanted to do something and give back to that community. And so the idea of Imperfect Genius was born. And I thought, well, and originally I foolishly thought, well, I'm going to do a blog. And the reason I say foolishly, I've mentioned multiple times on this podcast, I'm dyslexic. Why I thought it was a good idea for me to do a blog, I'm like, no, you're
Play to your
dyslexic.
strengths.
Exactly. But as you know, I talk a lot. So I was like, maybe it should be a podcast. So that was born. And so it was, again, and at the time that I left, it was just an idea. I had other things that I wanted to do with the business, and it was just, it was an idea, but it was directly born out of the sense of community that I had at New Relic. And so for that, I want to say thank you.
Well,
Thank you, Tracy, for
let me just say all of that makes my heart so happy because, I remember the conversations. First off, I remember when you first started and we met. And again, there weren't that many Black women sort of in these technical roles. And so whenever I meet a software engineer or technical solutions person that would come in, like I would like beeline and talk to them because I know you're surrounded by people who don't look like you. And so having a place where you could feel comfortable and feel supported was super important to me. And so again, it just makes my heart happy to hear that was beneficial to you, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about, my I wish everybody could stay and enjoy their long, I've been in New Relic 9.5 years. Oh my God.
Wow.
Right? It's kind of crazy. But like, it's not going to be that way for everybody. And so as long as I see people leave and continue to grow and learn and develop and have these professionally fulfilling careers, whatever form that's going to take, I'm happy, right?
Hmm.
Do I
Hmm.
feel sad when people leave because I want them to stay selfishly for the company, but also for me and our community? Yes, but the greatest gift really is to see people wind up in places and spaces where they can thrive. And for you, like sharing this gift with the rest of the world is pretty amazing. So thank you as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I will mention, and we won't go into details, but there was also a lot of other support you gave me while I was there too. You were amazing in your role as chief people officer. So I just want to say thank you for that. Okay, so then the other thing that I like to do whenever I'm doing these interviews is I like to start from the beginning. Again, you and I we agreed that we're going to talk about leading with impact, and that's going to be, we're going to talk about that in a second. But I like to sort of like go back and talk about how did you get to your current role, because I think a lot of the people who listen to the podcast they're listening and they're looking for ideas, or they're trying to get into tech, or they're trying to get into some field. And sometimes it's just inspiring, even if it's not the field that they're going to go into, it's inspiring to hear someone's story about how did they get there.
Yeah.
I've got an episode that by the time this one released, it would have come out already. That where I was talking to a television producer, a showrunner, and again, we don't have the same kind of background, and most of the stuff that I'm talking about is tech and entrepreneur. But she has a business, and we were talking about entrepreneurship, and her story was so inspiring. And I was like, oh man, I cannot wait to get this out to the world for everyone to hear. So, having said that, I would love to start with, where did it start for you? Like, as a kid or as a young woman, like, what did you want to be when you grow up? Like, where did you think you were going to be, and was it this?
Yeah.
And how did you get here?
First off, was it this? Absolutely not. Like no concept of all at to working in tech as a executive, as a chief people officer, or anything like that. I mean, literally, when I first think, if I think way back, I used to teach a lot, even as a kid. I was a teacher. I always thought I was going to be a teacher. At some point, I was thinking I'd be an architect, and then I got to, you know, lawyer, sports agent, and I had really like this big bold plan in my head about running the sports agency, and I want to talk about that a little bit. And ultimately didn't do that. And honestly, I hated law and it hated me, and so I did some vocational testing
Mm,
and I took sort of this bold step of, I've been to law school, but I don't really want to do that. If I don't do that, it feels like such a waste of time. But I kept
mhm,
telling myself, like, learning can never be a waste of time. So now you've got all this knowledge in your head on how to think logically and how to, more importantly, solve problems and solve problems for people, which is absolutely necessary in this world and has a lot of value. And so then I was like, all right, what do I do? So I did vocational testing and it was like, you'd be a good, because I'm also a caregiver. So it was like, you'd be a good doctor. Heck
mhm.
no, I'm not going back to school. I'm not going to medical
That
school.
means medical
Um,
school, right?
that's right. Teacher. And I was like, do I want to be restricted to a classroom? I don't really think so. And HR. And it was like, that's interesting. HR was interesting to me because it was like that. Um, amalgamation of business and law and people and all those things all together, which I was really excited about. And so I decided to go work for a retail company and started out like at the bottom as a employee. Well, not quite at the bottom. I started as an employee relations manager, again, doing investigations, helping people solve problems. and I learned a ton, but that's sort of how I got on the track of HR. And then I was kind of good at it. So I thought I'd really be in that retail HR space for my career.
Hmm.
And I got laid off twice. And the second time I got laid off, I just I took a pause and I was like, I, I, I need a break because employee relations and retail is, oh my gosh, it's like amazing the problems that you have to solve for people who, and you're just like, I always say I could write a book on the stupid things that people do and that you have to investigate and ultimately, fire them for.
You
Um,
probably should write that
I
book.
know, I know, I know. And so, I was like, well, what do I want? Like, what do I want out of this? Where do I want to have impact? And I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I am surrounded by tech companies. And I was like, man, wouldn't it be cool if I went to work for Facebook or Twitter or, one of these big name companies? And initially I was like, how in the world do you even cross that bridge? And I was like, oh, it should be fairly easy because it's HR. It is
I was going
not,
to say, who's the
right?
they that said that?
I was very naive. It was not
Mhm.
easy to get into tech companies on the HR team, even though I had all this experience. And I had people tell me like, oh my gosh, you've got such a good pedigree, which I thought was so offensive.
Like you were a pet.
Yes, exactly. I went to a great school. Yes, of
Yeah.
course that's all good, but but you don't have any tech experience. I'm like, what the heck? What's the difference between I know how to solve problems. What's the difference between, retail and technology? It really is just about learning the language. And so fortunately, I found somebody who was more open than a lot of those closed-minded big companies. And I started my career in HR technology, and clearly that has been my passion and sweet spot. So yeah,
So that's interesting.
how it happened.
I was gonna ask about, I was just asking like what challenges you faced along the way, and I feel like you answered it with A, the layoffs, and then B, with the trying to move from retail into tech. And it's interesting because I think a lot of people hit that problem where basically they're being told, "Oh, you have the right credentials." We won't say pedigree. You have the right credentials
Right.
for this role, except we want somebody who's done this exact same thing that looks like we want somebody just like the person who just left, or or even if it's a new role, we want somebody who's done this exact same thing at this exact same type of company before. And it's like,
Yep.
why can't my skills be translatable? So you said you found the right, because I was gonna say, like, how do you bridge that chasm? Like, how do you get over that hurdle? And it sounds like for you, it was finding the right person who was open to listening and saying, "Okay, I can see where this can translate." Does that feel like an
That's
accurate
exactly right. And at first, I mean, it was hard, and it was a lot of blows to my ego. Right, I'd been relatively successful, and to get the no's back when I felt like, oh man, that interview felt really good, and then they'd be like, oh, it was you, another person. We chose the other person. They had tech experience. And you're like, oh, how am I going to get tech experience unless somebody gives me a chance? And what
Right.
I learned, and what I used to tell myself all the time, and I know many people who are looking for a job, you know, it gets sort of frustration after frustration. It's just those places just weren't for me, right? And that's what I tell myself. That job wasn't for me. Those people, those were not my people. Whatever
Mhm,
it wasn't for me. And my job is still out there. I just have to be resilient and frankly persistent enough to keep at it.
mhm.
And that's what I did. I got my first tech job. Ironically, New Relic was my second tech job, and look
Ah,
what's happened. It was only my second job. My first
ah,
job was great. I worked for a company. In fact, we were similar size to when I moved over to New Relic until we
mhm.
got acquired. And the whole headquarters for the 17,000 person company was in Texas, and that was kind of the HR hub. And I remember visiting that office, and they were like, "Oh yeah, welcome," and they were super nice. Except they dropped down like this big giant binder of HR policy manual and processes. And I was like, what in the world? Like, I want to create and do all these things, but
Right.
so much of it had already been established that I didn't feel like there was a lot of autonomy. And so I started looking and fortunately found New Relic found me. Actually, I didn't find it. It found me, which was even better.
Awesome. Awesome. And so now here you are, Chief People and Culture Officer, which is, I mean, you don't get any higher than that in terms of the HR. So you are at the top of the org chart for HR. And so, like I said, I wanted to, when we talked about having this conversation on mic, and I said I wanted to talk about leading with impact because I feel like you can be a leader or you could be a leader with impact. Like, you can make a difference. And I feel like you are very much making a difference. So I want to ask you, like, what does leadership and leading with impact mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I wish a lot more people thought about this, like what kind of leader they want to be. But first off, I don't think that leadership is driven by my title. It is driven, so an individual contributor can be a leader. And you all have heard this before, but it really is about how you act. And so for me, it's about, am I taking ownership? Am I inspiring and enabling others? Even when I didn't have like this role, right? So what kind of leader was I being in, even when I was an individual contributor? And I was for a long time. I started as an HR business partner, but I made sure I had a voice, that my voice was heard. I earned my seat at the table. And what you want is not just to be at the table. When I first got there, I was super quiet. It was because I was the sponge learning everything. But then you speak up and you provide some sort of value. And so that's the leadership and the type of leader that I wanted to be. And then when you think about impact, it's probably one of the things that I think about most. And I still not used to. I run the diversity and social impact team as well, but it's you know am I driving positive and sustained change in the organization? Am I setting a good example and supporting people around me and really pushing them to be better versions of themselves? And then when they're not, holding them accountable in those moments, right? And so
Mhm.
really being thoughtful about, like, it's not just this moment of I'm being successful. It's, is my team being successful, my community being successful? Am I supporting where we're trying to go as a company? What kind of impact are we delivering to the organization? And that is, like, for me, that is an everyday thought, because I really don't want to like spend 9.5, 10 years here and then be like, I'm out and wow, Tracy was here, but no, like there's no sort of footprint left
Right,
by
right. What is
by
her
the time I
legacy? What did
spent.
she
That's right.
Yeah,
What is that legacy? Yep.
right, right. Now, you mentioned Mikey Butler when we were talking about the ERGs. I'm curious what leaders have influenced you, good or bad? Even bad ones can influence you in a direction in terms of what type of leader you want to be. I'm curious about what leaders inspired you.
So Mikey Butler, oh my gosh. Mikey, let me just say really quickly. So Mikey Butler was SVP of engineering. And I remember when I was getting recruited by New Relic, I looked on, we do our little research, and I went on the website and Mikey's picture was on there. And I was like, right? Like SVP of engineering, that I'm okay. There's a black man on their leadership page who's the SVP of engineering. And I was so impressed by that. But I was even more impressed by him as a man, as a human, as a leader. He was very much like, for everyone. He was, first off, he was very supportive to people of color and to women. So if you were a member of underrepresented group, he took you under his wing if that's what you wanted. He gave you tough feedback in the moments you needed it. He talked me off many ledges when I was like, oh my gosh, these people. But he also challenged me, right? To, if I really wanted to continue to grow my career, on some things that I needed to do. And good leaders really do that. Another example is my predecessor at New Relic, which is his prior chief people officer. I mean, she was not afraid of me taking her job. And you see a lot of leaders who are just so insecure about their place in the company that they don't want the folks that work for them to grow and sort of outshine them. she was like, shine on, let me help you. Let me help you shine, right? What do you want to do? She really created that safe space for me, and helped me develop in all the areas. I didn't know what it meant to be a chief people officer. And frankly, when I started in the role, I was like, what the heck? I didn't know it was all this.
Right.
But I
Right.
was really lucky because we thought that I would either stay sort of in a number two role, which frankly, I was really happy. I didn't care because I really enjoyed working with her. I felt rewarded, recognized, all the things that you want. Or that I would have to leave to be promoted. And I kept thinking, like, if you leave, like, are you going to find New Relic somewhere else, right?
Right. Right.
And I ended up with the sort of best of what was possible, which is that she promoted into another role in the company, chief operating officer, and I got promoted. And I know that I got promoted with her full support and certainly sponsorship, right? Because I didn't know our CEO was newly promoted, and I didn't really have a relationship with him, and so that took sponsorship from her and probably others to ensure that I was moved into that role behind her, which was great.
I remember that. I was there when that happened, and it was like she stepped over, like you say, into chief operating officer, and then you got promoted. So you got promoted to be her peer after being her number 2, and I
Yeah,
was like, "That's so amazing that basically she created space for you." I
she
remember
did.
that.
And I will say, like, that comment there, I was thinking about this, that I remember we did this. You know, like, does this really creative stuff sometimes, and we had Robin DiAngelo, who I cannot remember the name of the White Fragility, and
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
she wrote that book, and then she was kind of doing these talks and training. So we had her come to New Relic and do this leadership training, and I remember sitting in there, and at that point, all of our leadership, everyone was white, and it was me and the director of DE and I were in there. And I remember being in like listening to all of people's different experiences. And I was like, wow, like I can't even imagine. I grew up in the Bay Area, which is very diverse, but there are so many people who didn't have that same experience. And so their first engagement with people of color is when they go to college, right? And so
Mhm.
they're like learning. And so just listening to this was pretty amazing. But I remember going into another meeting and talking about it and talking about diversity and the importance of making space. And someone said to me, well, why? And this was again, I try to create the safest spaces for people to just be open. And so this person said, what would encourage a person to give up their seat at the table? And I said, who's asking for that? Like, I don't want somebody to hand, I don't want charity, and nobody else in
Right.
my position wants charity. I want fairness. I want somebody to not close the door in my face with a big,
Right.
boulder behind it, right?
Yeah,
Just
don't give up
open
your
the
seat, but
door and
don't pull
let
out
me
the chair from
be.
under me.
That's right. That's right. And so I think a lot of it with people, even who have the best intention, is sort of that belief that they have to give up something to make space for others. And I'm like, no, just slide over and add the other chair. And that's exactly what Christy did. Is she ended up sliding over and
Mhm.
added a chair for me, right? And that
Right.
that was absolutely incredible.
Right, exactly. Well, I
Yeah.
feel like that's a natural segue into another thing that I wanted to talk to you about, which was, speaking of diversity and social impact, I feel like the last year in this country, maybe more than maybe the last couple of years or so, like things have been going in reverse. And you know this from when we worked together, like my passion for the longest has been to see more diversity in tech because when I was in undergrad, I was the only female. I was only well, in some of my classes, I was the only woman, but I was always definitely the only Black woman, and a lot of times I was the only Black person,
Yeah.
or it was me and one other guy, and we're still friends. Like he's working at Intel these days, but so. And then when fast forward to the first time I retired, I've retired so many times now, but the first time I attempted to retire, when I was leaving, I was like, I promised myself, I was like, when I pay off my mortgage, I'm leaving tech because I don't need this money anymore. I'm gonna go do my own thing. And so I was happened to be at AT&T working there when I paid off my mortgage, and I was like, okay, I'm leaving. They're like, where are you going? I was like, I don't know. I was like, I'll figure it out.
But
And so
I'm
I
leaving.
ended up, that's when would you say?
That's it. But I'm leaving.
Exactly, but I was like, "But I'm leaving." And so when I ended up teaching. I was, at the college level. That's when I was the software engineering professor, and I would look out at my because for the most part, I taught upper level courses, so third and fourth year. So they were small class. They weren't the big lectures, but my one big lecture class was professional practices and ethics. So that was one of the, because that,
Mm.
like, everybody in second year had to take that. So like that was my big like lecture hall. And I would look out at it and I'm like, why does it still look the same as it did in the 80s? Like, where are the women? Where are the people of color? It's just like, I don't understand why tech still looks the same way.
Yeah.
And so like, that's always been a passion of mine, is like trying to see more diversity in tech, which is, part of like why I do the things that I do. But it just feels like it's just been going in reverse. And I'm like, I feel like at some point it's going to be back to where there's nobody, there's no diversity, and it's not just in tech. I say in tech because that's where my focus is, but it's
Yeah.
same in entrepreneurship, because just in terms of like being resourced for funding and things like that for businesses, and being under resourced and whatnot. But I feel like it's broadly in corporate America as well. And I'll give you and I'll stop this rambling and ask a question in a second. But I'll give you another example. I like, just for my own mental health and just wanting to give back to the community, I work with a nonprofit that empowers young girls to be strong, smart, and bold. And which I'm wearing the shirt. I don't know if I have to back up so you can see the shirt. But anyway, and long story short, when, after the election and all these companies were basically bending the knee and trying to show that, they were not giving to diverse initiative or whatever, they lost a lot of funding. And so they had to cut back on their programming, and it changed the look of what they were doing for these after school programs and these STEM programs. It changed a lot of what they were doing. So it's not just, my point is, it's everywhere. Like it's impacting, even just trickle down to everywhere, to these nonprofits for these like after school programs for girls and things like that. And it's so disheartening for me. It's just so disheartening, because I feel like I feel a little bit like Benjamin Buttons. I'm like going in reverse. I'm like, I'm going back to, the 80s or whatnot. So I'm just wondering like what your thoughts are, with regard to diversity and social impact. Like, what are your thoughts on that subject, and where you think we're headed, and how, like, I don't even know if you think it needs to be fixed, but if you think it's broken, like, I know you can't answer the how do we fix it, but just some ideas that you have in terms of like, what do we do to continue to support diversity and social impact?
Woo, girl, there's a lot in that long
I know,
question.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm
It's
sorry.
okay.
I got on a soapbox there for a minute.
Yes,
Sorry
that's
about
okay.
that.
I'm passionate about this too. And let me first say, like, when you were talking about why is it that we still come into spaces like in tech companies and we're the only ones, I think there's two things. And I think one of them is when you say tech company, I think people really think about tech as opposed to it's a company, it's a business that has
Right.
the full gamut of marketing, legal, finance and
Right.
accounting, HR. Like there are other functions in that, and we think about it's just tech. The other thing,
Right.
obviously, that I talked about is it is sometimes hard to break through that barrier when you're trying to get your first role in a tech company for whatever weird reason. A lot of companies want to hire folks that have tech experience. The second thing is, education. If you think about education in especially like inner city, right? There's so many smart kids. None of them think about, I want to go, I shouldn't say none, but it is rare probably for kids to think about, I want to go be a software engineer. And part of it is because in inner city schools that are underfunded, they don't even have computers like in
Right.
these wealthier schools, right? That have funding. Kids have computers, they have teachers who are teaching them how to think and tinker and code and things like that. So they develop these passions, and that's been going on for a long time. So kids are often relying on special programs that we all need to continue to figure out how to fund, right? So that's my soapbox about like how we all need to lean in there. On the current state of DE&I and tech, corporate America, um, I will say that this past, and it honestly it's been longer than a year for me. It's been the last several years, right? It's
Mhm.
back to when Obama first ran. It's like that vitriol, all the really negative things that people are saying about immigration and people who are
Mhm.
here who are undocumented workers, and you just kind of like I'm like I'm so over it. Everybody's human. No one's better than the other. Like, just please, if you weren't so insecure, maybe we could like, don't get me started, right? But this most recent election, honestly, was so I was so personally hurt by all of the things, right? The things that were being said about uh, candidate Harris. Like, she was me as a Black woman. She was me for a lot of
Mhm.
reasons. She grew up in the Bay Area. She pledged AKA. She went to law school. We went to the same school. Like, I'm like, how can you say this about her, right? And there were
Mhm.
so many
Right.
things that you heard, sort of the majority sort of spewing negatively about her, but then you also had people in our own community picking up some of those pieces. And so you heard a lot of the misogyny coming through, right?
Yep.
And even our own community, and talking about how, she wasn't Black enough. I've heard that before.
Yeah.
You talk a certain way, and I'm like, I speak English. I went to school. I
Exactly.
speak English. Like, what's wrong with that? Like, I
Right.
can also get down with that code switch and
Right.
get down with people in
Exactly.
it too. Like, but I
Right.
am in a situation where I need to speak a certain way. So I do, because that's my professional persona, and we all have them. But to get just completely, like, to have people denigrate her to such a point, I felt all of it, right? But I
Mhm.
am also uh, an optimist. And so I think about things will eventually turn back the right way. And so I'm like, the fact that there are a lot of companies who have just sort of continued to do the work. They're not
Mhm.
making now, Costco, shout out to them, because they just put their foot down and were like, we are not changing. We're going to continue our programs. But the pace at which some of these other folks, I was like, thank you for showing me your true colors, right?
Right.
Some of them are paying deeply for that. Target, as an example,
Yeah.
right? People have
Perfect
boycotted,
example.
and man, you talk about the importance of this work. I used to work for Target. It was one of the things that I respected about them, is their commitment to the community. And they were one of the first ones to be like,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
right? But there's so many companies that have just said, look, we don't want to be in the news. What we want to do is stay committed. And so we're just going to quietly continue that work. And I talk to a lot of my peers, and I know that that's happening. And that gives me a lot of faith that sort of undercurrent will continue to grow. And we're going to get through this. We're not going to go all the way back to, God knows where. We're gonna continue to move forward. It's just going to be slower, right? It's not going
Mhm.
to be as visible. And so I think so that's one thing. I think it will, it's in a, what feels like a bad place now, because there's so much sort of talking and negativity. And the guy in the White House, whose name I just refuse to say, that dude has his opinion. He's got a lot of trolls and followers who are doing whatever they can to scream the loudest.
Mhm.
Um, and at some point, I think the, rational American is going to start to scream back. Right
Mhm.
now, they're just like, "Whoo, those people are crazy," and I don't, right? I don't want to deal with
Right.
them.
Right.
Eventually, they're going to have to, right? Like, and you're starting to see that. I mean, I think, as you said, the other part was like, where do I think we're heading? Um, I will tell you also, what makes me super optimistic is the number of young people and those from underrepresented groups winning these major political battles.
True.
And
Yeah.
that
Very
means
true.
people want better for our country, and people aren't going to continue to tolerate. They want more compassion, they want more opportunity. They are tired of the lies. They are just like, now they're starting to like, okay, all right, we have had enough, and maybe we can't do anything there for a while. We need to get more power back, because we gave away too much. And we gave away too much because, honestly, who thought it was going to be, I did. Who thought it was going to get this bad? If you read Project 2025, you knew
2025. Yeah.
exactly what was going to happen,
Exactly.
right? And
Exactly.
so I do think that things will shift, and start to sort of rebuild and hopefully in a better way, that's more systemic, as opposed to what we often rely on, which is like, am I changing hearts and minds? It is really
Mhm.
hard to do that. What you have to do is fight to change systems. where
Right.
people aren't, it's not visible, it's just happening, right? Fairness into the system. You're finding those points where there can be bias introduced, and you're finding opportunity to take the bias opportunity out, just so it's fair, right? Get more
Mm,
candidates at the top of your pipeline that look like a bunch of different people. And, I always say, like, the diversification of the candidate funnel is what you want. The best person works their way through, as long as you make sure that you're looking at where those points of bias may hit, and you're working
right.
working to remove those. So, all that to say, I'm optimistic, and even though, whoo, man, punch in the gut often.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I was gonna ask, but I feel like you answered it. I was gonna ask, like, for people like me who are just weary of the fight, 'cause, like, if you feel like been fighting forever and it's just not, where, like I said, I feel like I'm going backwards, but it sounds like I was gonna ask you what words of comfort you would have for people like me who don't fit the mold of, like, what
Yeah.
somebody should look like or people expect somebody to look like in a role. But it sounds like your answer is just it's the pendulum's gonna swing back the other way. It's just gonna be slow, and the answer is to fix the systems and not worry about trying to change hearts and minds, because the trolls are gonna be the trolls. You're
Trolls are
not
gonna
gonna
be
change their
trolls.
mind, you're not
That's
gonna
right.
change their heart. Yeah.
That is right. And let me also say, like, just be okay. Like, the way that you feel is how you feel, and that is fine. Like, don't let
Yeah.
anybody tell you shouldn't feel a certain way. I think also, and I've said this in many environments, but, like, you belong in spaces, you belong there, right? And so don't let people tell you that you don't belong. And if they're telling you don't belong in that space, that's not a space you want to be in. Like, let them do
Right.
their thing over there. That y'all not my people. I'm going to find my people over here somewhere. Like, I just haven't found my people, right? Just like my search to get to my first tech company, and that was a good experience as well. But it is important to find your people. And I will
Mhm.
also say that because it's hard and it can be exhausting, and we always, like, everybody says it, you have to be better than the best. Like, you always have to, perform better and all the things. But we need hype people, right? Um, I talk about this, like, seriously, you need a hype person. You either need
Yeah.
one or you need to be one for yourself, and
Right.
let that person, that voice become the loudest in your head, because when you're tired of fighting and weary from this, like, that negativity can really bring you down, and so you have to protect your peace, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then finally, I would say, like, this is a marathon. Like,
Yeah.
like,
Not a
I don't
sprint.
need to win tomorrow. Like, this journey for me to get from where I was, the child of a single parent in a working class, neighborhood, who I was fortunate, I went to a very diverse school, that was pretty good, and ranked in California. I don't know where, but, like, that was a feeder school to UC Berkeley, and I happened to be able to get into that right track with the right people. But that this journey has been a journey, and it has been circular, up and down, painful, tears, celebration, like, all of it. And honestly, I talk about this with my husband, but I'm super grateful for all of it, because if it didn't happen that way, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point. That I like your optimistic view. I'm gonna try to adopt that. Well,
Call me if
Tracy,
you ever
it's
want to talk.
okay. I'm gonna
Very
take you up on that. Well, Tracy, it's been a genuine honor to have you as a guest. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing your story with my listeners. It's great to see your face. It's great to talk to you. I'm really looking forward to putting this episode out in the world so people can hear your story. Ah, just thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It has been a pleasure. I'm glad that we could finally, my schedule has been super crazy. So thanks for your patience.
Oh, no
And
problem. You were
we
worth the
will
wait.
continue to watch you thrive. I'm so excited for you and happy for you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. And to the listeners, I hope you found some inspiration in this discussion. Lots of pearls of wisdom were dropped here. Thank you for listening. You can leave us a voicemail with any questions that you might have at 404-425-9862, or send us a text. You can follow me on social media at Ask Imperfect Genius. And until next time, this is Rachel Foster reminding you, while your journey may not be flawless, it can be phenomenal.